Welcome to today's episode of Print to Pixel, the podcast where we talk to marketing leaders and technologists about how omni-channel marketing is revolutionizing the way that direct mail and digital marketing are used together. My name is Dennis Kelly. I'm the CEO of Postalytics, the leading direct mail automation platform that makes direct mail marketing as easy as email. I'm excited today to welcome Drew Neisser to the show. Drew Neisser is the penguin in chief of CMO Huddles, as well as a CEO of Renegade Marketing. Drew is obsessed with B2B CMOs, Ben Franklin, and penguins. He's founded 2 companies, written 2 books, and recorded over 400 podcasts of the Renegade Marketers Unite podcast. Having interviewed over 600 CMOs, he's a singular expert. Drew has been described by Jay Baer as one of the strongest B2B marketing thinkers in the world. Drew has advised dozens of CMOs on a one-to-one basis and hundreds through CMO Huddles, the flocking awesome community of B2B marketing leaders that he started in 2020. His most recent book, Renegade Marketing, 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands, was a 2023 finalist for the AMA's Best Marketing Book. He's a top voice on LinkedIn, an Ad Age columnist, an Urban Green Council board member, an active Duke alum, and proudly supports the Global Penguin Society. Drew, welcome to Print to Pixel.
Dennis, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for doing this show. I know how much work it is to produce a podcast, so I know for one, I'm grateful to be here.
Well, we're super excited to have you. It's not often that you meet folks that have taken such a deep dive into the B2B marketing world. And, I think in order to set the stage for some of our conversation, we'd love to hear more about kind of how you got here. What were the key steps in your career path and those influences that brought you to this point in your career?
It's so funny. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and they did this exercise where you were paired with somebody else and you had 60 seconds to tell your life story. So I'm going to try to do that for you to make it condensed and some of the highlights. I started my career in marketing at famous agencies that barely exist anymore, Wellsridge Green, JWT, and in the early days, it was clear to me I always wanted to do more than just advertising. Went to Chiat, learned planning, went to Dentsu, a big Japanese agency, just to try to find a way of changing the conversation from advertising-centric to a broader idea-based. At Dentsu, I got the opportunity unusual opportunity to start an agency that eventually became Renegade Marketing. And Dentsu came to me and said, "Hey, Drew, we want to start an agency going after Panasonic. They're our second largest client in the world." I said, "Great, but the world doesn't need another advertising agency." They were happy with Gray. Can we be the anti-Gray? And that's what got me started in this world of Renegade Marketing. We literally started out as a guerrilla marketing agency, and it's very much in sync. We did lots of what you call high touch, high impact direct mail. So I'm very familiar with your world and where you're trying to go. From there, one of our clients said, "Hey, I'm starting this group called the CMO Club. Do you want to help out?" And I said, "Sure." So we built the first website. We designed the logo for the CMO Club. And that's when I started interviewing CMOs. So that's when you get to the first interview that ultimately led to 600. But while I was with helping the CMO Club, the last 5 years I was focused on B2B and because it wasn't a focus of the CMO Club. So when my buddy Pete Kranick sold the CMO Club to Salesforce on March 2nd, 2020, just incredible timing, the light bulb went off. For me, I thought Salesforce would blow it. And I also thought that nobody's really focused just on B2B. So we literally started April 1st, turned on CMO Huddles as a beta concept. We met with a group of about 50 CMOs 55 times in 6 months. And these kind folks sort of set up what CMO Huddles could become, set the vision, set the pricing, all this good stuff. And this was, of course, all during the pandemic. So we were virtual first. And I consider myself one of the luckiest folks around in that I was able to transition to, right now, CMO Huddles is the business. Renegade Marketing is closed as an agency. It's a media brand that supports CMO Huddles. And I get to talk to CMOs every single day.
That's awesome.
So
that's awesome.
There it is.
So tell us about CMO Huddles. Give us a flavor of what it's all about. Obviously, the name is somewhat indicative of who you're targeting,
Right.
But give us an overview of that. We'd love to understand more.
Sure. So the notion of CMO Huddles is pretty simple. That together CMOs can solve all of their problems, but individually, it looks like a really heavy load and a heavy lift. Let's face it, and in the last year or so, it's been particularly challenging for CMOs. You have the speed of technology, the hidden economy recession that we did some research on, the budget cuts that asked them to do more with less. The strain on the role has just gotten really, really harsh. So to be able to say, hey, you can come into the safe environment of 12, 10 CMOs, and we can talk about the most important issues that you're facing right now. So our conversation this month is budgeting. And so we have 3 huddles with just heads of marketing, and I moderate these conversations, and we're very much focused on what's working and what's not working, not opinions. It's an opinion-free zone. It's all about what's working and what isn't. And then we also bring in experts from the outside for things called bonus huddles or career huddles. We have a series where we bring in best-selling authors every month, and these are all based on authors that the community has recommended. And then so there's sort of that part of CMO Huddles, and then there's 2 other parts that are really, really important to this. And one is that CMOs forget to invest in their personal brands and the brands, period. Whether it's the company brand or personal brand, they're too busy doing that. So we make sure that they get on our live streaming show twice a year. We have other ways of helping them, like our Tuesday Tip video series, that help them establish their voice in the marketing community, which helps them long term. And then the third component is if they lose their job, we have a program called the Transition Team, which supports them in a way specific to the needs of a CMO in transition. So it's like, you could think of it as an insurance policy. You could think of it as a secret weapon. We like to think of it as flocking awesome, which gets to the penguins.
Yes, tell us about the penguins. Your penguin in chief.
The penguins. Thank you for asking. So I happened to be in the Galapagos a couple of years ago. The guide said, "Anybody know what a group of penguins are called?" Nobody raised their hand. Some person shouted, "Huddle! It's a huddle!" And light bulbs went off, and he said, "Oh my God, it is such a huddle!" And so at that moment, I literally sent a text to one of our lead designers and said, "Hey, add penguins to our logo. We're going all in." And so just for fun, like in the Global Penguin Society, we literally give 1% of revenue to the Global Penguin Society. My 400th episode of Renegade Marketers Unite, I interviewed the founder of the Global Penguin Society. And if you read anything I write, you'll find there are tremendous commonalities between the challenges that CMOs face and the challenges that penguins face. So it all comes together, and that's why we're flocking awesome.
Well, I think that this is clearly the mark of somebody who has spent a lot of time in the marketing world, because it is a memorable brand separator, and since the movie Happy Feet came out when I think my kids were maybe 10 or 12 years old, penguins have been at the sweet spot of everybody's hearts. So you can't go wrong sticking a penguin in your logo and incorporating it into your tagline. I love it.
Well, we have, it is fun. And one of the things that we try to do in CMO Huddles is kind of lead by example. And most of B2B marketing is boring. Nothing we're doing is boring, and that's the key. And it is a differentiator. And we take the relationships that we build seriously, but we certainly don't take our brand seriously.
That's great. I love it. So you mentioned that you've written a couple books.
Yep.
So I was taking a pass through your book, Renegade Marketing: 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands. And I saw that you had established a framework for B2B brand building. That's really cool. I think every marketer, whether they're a CMO or director of marketing, marketing manager, they love frameworks. So give us some of the highlights of your framework for B2B brand building.
Sure. So I wrote my first book after 100 interviews. Somebody said to me, "Hey, Drew, there's got to be a book in there." And that book was called The CMO's Periodic Table. And it laid out 64 sort of elements that you need to go. The one thing that was interesting about that book was a lot of people who love to be the mixers and grab the elements said, "This is amazing. Thank you for writing the book." But a lot of other people said, "Well, where's the prescription? What's the thing I need to do? And what's the commonality that you found in all these interviews?" And that's when I developed the CATS framework that's set up. And CATS stands for courageous, artful, thoughtful, and scientific. And if you think about those as building blocks for marketing and marketers, it takes courage to have a focused strategy. It takes courage to be distinctive. You're going to add a penguin to your logo? What are you, crazy? We got a board and we got all these other things. Why could you do that? Well, because it helps differentiate and it has meaning to the brand. Are you going to pounce on a purpose? And I'm not saying you have to save the world here, but it does help when your organization knows where you're going. Feel free to substitute the word vision. But so all of those things take courage, and it's why you could go to most B2B websites. If you took the logo off it and said, okay, and you looked at 5 competitors, they use the same language, they use the same colors, they use the same everything, and it's like they're targeting the same people. It just doesn't work. There's a problem. I mean, that's a race to the bottom, and it becomes a pricing game. So it takes courage to differentiate, and it takes a CEO to have that courage and a CMO to sort of run with it. So anyway, that's courage. I can keep going. Artful is not, as a marketer, you do not have to be the most creative person in the room, but you do have to know how to drive creativity. And you know how to that. And that's part of the role of being a marketer is you're in the middle. I call that chapter Welcome We. You have to be someone who can simplify a story. Like flocking awesome. Just, okay, that's a very simple thing that I can expand on. And then you have to recognize that design matters. If you don't recognize that design matters, then you're going to look like every other brand. So that's artful. Then we get to thoughtful, and we're in this give to get world. And by that, I mean, if you want someone's attention, you better give them something of value. And that exchange starts with you, the company, and the marketer. And that's Google saying, "Hey, do search on us." Well, and then the get is they get your eyeballs, right? But this all starts with employees and then customers. And I turn targeting upside down in the book. I say people spend more time on prospecting, too much dollars on prospecting, not enough dollars on employees and customers. Happy employees. I know one company that grew from about 25 million to 400 million with this internal plan, happy employees equals happy customers.
That's awesome.
That was their business strategy in insurance.
Wow.
But that's such a simple concept, right? So then finally we get to scientific method. And the key thing there is that all of the other stuff, you can have courage, you can be an artful ideator, you can be a thoughtful executor. But if you don't have some science behind you, some metrics to support your case, you're going to fail. You're going to fail in the boardroom, and you're going to fail yourself, because it's like, Well, how do we know we got there? How do we know we accomplished what it is? I'm not saying everything's measurable, but I am saying a lot is, and you've got to know what's important. And then lastly, the best part of being in marketing is that you are the ones that can experiment. Yet more times out of not, I'll say to a CMO, how much money do you have in your budget for experimentation? And they'll say 1%, 2%, maybe 1%. And it's like, why isn't that number 10%? And the reason it's not 10% is because it's often, if you expose that number, the CFO goes, oh, let's grab that.
Right. Exactly.
So, fine, hide it. I don't care. Just make sure that you're experimenting, because what's working today will not necessarily work tomorrow. And you need to have those tests in place right now so that you can jump on it. And in my book, I have for every one of those things, several case histories that bring it to life.
Well, that's great. I think, that CATS model, courageous, artful, thoughtful, scientific, it speaks to building a brand with some balance. And, you mentioned you go to B2B marketing, B2B companies' websites, and they all look the same. And, there's a lack of risk taking. There's a lack of artfulness. And often there is a over reliance on conversion rate optimization, right, at the expense of some of the other elements that help to build a brand. And so, I find that having, a little bit of courage and a little bit of art mixed in with that thoughtfulness and science is really something that will build something of value over the long term, right? Instead of simply having a very transactional type of approach to marketing.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say about the conversion rate optimization, because I've had this conversation now with 3 CMOs that I thought were doing really interesting work. And if you want to find interesting work in B2B, look at the brands that are B2B2C. They're the ones that probably at the end of the day, they realize that consumers are using their product. And so they start to do interesting work. But what's fascinating to me, and this is where I'll see the work and I go, oh, that's really cool. I get it. There's an idea. It's an insight. It's distinctive. And there's a value prop that people can sort of wrap their mind around and relate to. And then you go to the website and that story is nowhere to be found. And I say, why isn't it there? And he said, well, because our e-commerce guy says, the conversion, that's going to take up space and maybe drop our conversion rate. And I'm thinking, because, and I know that's hard to argue because you can test landing pages easily. Right. And so this, I think, is a really, and I don't have a good answer, because if it's you, Dennis, and your marketer is saying, hey, I've got 2 pages here. This one has more brand differentiation on it. This one's optimizing 10% better. Which one do you want to run? What are you going to say to them?
I want revenue this quarter, my friend.
Exactly. So this is a really hard case. And I wish there was a simpler answer, or because it's a long-term versus a short-term thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Reputations are built, every single interaction at a time over time. And then of course they're lost in a heartbeat. And one thing that reputation is ease of navigation and user experience. And so if you optimize for user experience, and that means dropping brand, I get it, because in some ways you are being customer centric at that moment. I just think, gotta believe there is a way to do both, that it doesn't have to be an or, it's gotta be an and.
And it doesn't all have to be online. It doesn't all have to be on the website. It can be in a lot of places, and we'll come back to that, of course.
Okay.
So just what I find interesting, I don't speak with many people that talk to as many B2B CMOs as you do. In fact, nobody. So I think what is really interesting is we're heading into, Q4 here. We're into Q4 of 2024. I have to imagine the CMOs are thinking 2025. They're planning, they're budgeting, and so on and so forth. What are some of the top priorities that you're hearing, and what are some of the top challenges that
Right.
the CMOs that you work with are talking about in the huddles? And so, if you could share some of that with the audience, I think that'd be really helpful.
Sure. So it's funny because we're recording this right in the middle of budgeting season, and we actually, as I mentioned, we have three. We have another one. Oh, we have one tonight, and the conversations are really interesting. First, the question is, are they going to get more budget? And 50% or so are not. So they are going to, but that doesn't mean their goals aren't going to go up. It just means they're going to have to do more with less again, right? And so, if I step back and say, what are the real challenges that they are facing? They're still facing macro challenges. I mentioned this research we did on the hidden recession in B2B. Unless you're in generative AI or cybersecurity, you are still looking at a CF no. You are still really struggling with deal cycle length, which have extended. You're struggling with close rates, which have gone down. Another study I just saw today said something like 50% of folks will not be hitting their goals this year. That's not a good number. So
No.
the pressure on the CMO to deliver pipeline and opportunities has never been greater. Now, and so if you look at what they're thinking about, well, how do I put more dollars into pipeline? And unfortunately, they're saying more dollars into pipeline, less dollars into reputation building, or what you would call brand. And I think that's a losing strategy. But I think it's a fine quarterly strategy. I don't think it's an annual strategy. And I think CMOs have to work harder to make the business case for anything that doesn't look like demand gen. Now, the counter trend to all of this is events are back. Events are more expensive, but events are the place that you can multitask with events. You've got your late stage folks that you can invite and close, and that's happening and it's working. You've got customers that you might be able to upsell or cross-sell that you can engage with. And you got employees that are there that are finally getting to meet some other employees, and you can use that as an opportunity to bring your employee teams together. So there's a lot of goodness that is coming out of events, and so I see dollars spent like that. And then I will share one other thing with you, because this just came up, and I know you'll appreciate it because it's going to be music to your ears. One of the CMOs in our group was talking about how they're doubling down on their sort of, we'll call it, campaign approach to DM. And they did a bunch of tests, and this is so funny because I remember getting a direct mail piece from the post office in the 90s that talked about, by the way, if you do direct mail and radio, it will increase. If you do direct mail and television, it'll do this much more. And that was research from 40 years ago or 30 years. Anyway, this CMO shared that they had just done this in their multi-channel approach, email and LinkedIn outreach and things, and DM was outperforming anything else they were doing.
That's awesome. Well, I think you're right. That is music to the ears. That's what this podcast is all about. The idea that marketing channels should be working together. The idea that direct mail as an offline channel should be fully integrated with your digital approach is at the core of this podcast. It's the core of Postalytics, and it's a message that we're trying to spread out there. So I'm glad to hear that one of your CMOs is reporting great results. And if when you think about it in the abstract, and leave direct mail aside, as marketers, we're speaking to the market through many different means. You're saying events are back, which is awesome. I personally love events, and I find them to be very effective. But if the event strategy is saying one thing, and your email marketing is saying something else, and your website is saying something else, how am I supposed to think about your company? right? How am I? Your left hand and your right hand don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So why would they give me confidence to spend time with you if your messaging isn't coordinated, if your messaging is disconnected, you're not making a strong brand impression for sure. Um, and so, I think fundamentally marketing has to be omni-channel in its approach. Um, and it's funny, it's kind of a funny word, omni-channel. Um,
Right.
and it's it replaced multi-channel, and I'm sure there'll be some evolution of it as we go along. But this notion of a holistic approach to using all of the touch points together in a thoughtful way, in a scientific way, in a courageous way, and in an artful way. I got the order wrong, Drew, but
It's all
I got
good.
them all in there.
Yeah.
Right?
No, you're still a cool cat, Dennis.
I'm not quite a penguin yet, but
Not
we're
not a
working on
penguin
it.
yet. No. Yes.
So, but just this idea that your marketing is consistent, and it's reaching people in multiple ways, in the ways that they want to interact with your brand, has to be at the root of what we're trying to do. That's how we feel.
Oh,
We're very passionate
yeah,
about
no,
that,
and
as you
it's
can
not.
tell.
I mean, there's speaking of scientific. I mean, I've had Brent Adamson, who wrote Challenger Sale, Challenger Customer, and all the research that he did at CEB and then Gartner. With the math was so the difference between we'll call it a disintegrated campaign and an integrated campaign was like 2.2 times more effective when you had multiple channels saying the same thing or at least the same overarching idea.
Yes.
You had
Yes.
2 point times more likely to close. And that's a big number. I mean, I would have been fine if it was 0.5, but it's significant. And the issue that I think that we face right now is it is so easy to create content. It's so easy to create messaging at like scale. Like you could create 300 or 3,000 messages using an LLM in a second, and you could try to test all of them. And what's happening is you're making your budget, sort of the peanut butter effect, and it is disintegrating before our eyes because we're doing it. Whereas the opposite approach is say, I'm going to do one big tentpole thing every quarter, baked out of an original piece of research that is proprietary. So I have information I can bring, I can get PR out of it, and then I can iterate against that one big tentpole idea. And that's the notion that we're all going with. And we're consistently sharing it regardless of the title. Obviously there are nuances. You talk to a CFO slightly differently than you do a CRO, than you do a CMO. But if your overarching idea and story and reason for being, or pick one of those, is the same and you're doing it over and over again, that consistency will pay. And this is one of the things that, everybody knows that the CMO spot and actually the CRO spot are revolving doors right now. And the result of that, the CEOs aren't thinking about, which they should, is that means that their marketing is going to change. And if they're only keeping a CMO 18 months and your deal cycle is 2 years, what are you doing? Because all you're doing is guaranteeing that you're going to have a different message every 18 months. And you haven't even closed the business that you started your first conversation with. So it's a problem. It's sort of self-inflicted, but and then the same thing happens with a new CMO comes in and says, well, the last CMO must have failed. I better change the messaging. And it's like, wait, stop, don't. Be sure. Because that consistency, when someone finally gets to know your brand, and I describe marketing as an epic struggle for mind space. When you're finally in someone's head, why would you walk away from that?
Right.
Unless you're Netflix DVD and DVD business is going out, then you better reinvent, and you got to do that with product, not message, product. You are transforming the company. We are turning the ship in a new way, right? That's not the same as messaging.
That's right. That's right. You're absolutely spot on. And this notion of consistency is so important. And one of the things that's unique about where we sit in this at Postalytics meeting, and our goal is to disrupt and grow the world of direct mail marketing. So we're bringing in a lot of folks that have never done direct mail before, or haven't done it. If their companies have done it 20 years ago, they're coming back to it for a variety of reasons. And they'll say, "Hey, going to run a proof of concept, and we're going to get a direct mail touch out to 6,000 people, and we're going to evaluate the results and kind of go from there." And I say to them, "Okay, so let's instead pretend that you paid a salesperson to call 6,000 people and leave a voicemail. What do you think the results are going to be?" Not very good. There is very little to be gained by experimenting and not being consistent and not having a true plan to actually embed those messages, right, in those channels that you are experimenting with. And so I see that as all the time. I've got customers coming in, and they really need help with strategy. They need help with the strategy around these experiments that they're developing, because they want to try, they do want to experiment, but they are struggling with a framework that can provide them with success in doing so.
Yeah, and I in my days in direct mail, I actually had 6 miserable weeks at Wonderman when it was the lowest point of my career. I absolutely detested that specific work, because all I was doing was working on American Express, testing envelopes. Do we have a more expensive envelope with an indicia or not? But there were a couple of things that I learned at that moment, which I think are still true. Effectiveness, 60% is your data, 30% is your offer, 10% is creativity. And I see that still playing out, right? But the thing about American Express at that time was, and it still is, it has mind share, right? So now we can optimize. It has a reason for it. And so most brands don't have mind share. So now they're confusing these tests on a tactical level with an overall brand or reputation issue. So I truly appreciate the fact that we're talking strategy first. If you get your big brand idea, however you want to articulate that, your reason for being, your strategy right, it will be easy to come up with DM tests. If you don't have that, then you're just, which envelope are we going to test, or which, you're not starting from a place of strength. It's a little, the book, it's a little blank, right? Whereas you want people use a North Star, right? For a strategy.
Absolutely. Yes, no doubt. I think you and I could probably swap stories all day long. And I've really enjoyed this. Drew, our audience, as you know, are marketers. They, I'm sure, having heard this, are going to be interested in learning more about CMO Huddles, learning more about your books, and so. How can our audience reach out and connect with you, and where can they find you?
Sure. So first, LinkedIn is my big easy place to find me. Drew Neisser at Neisser, and I'm posting a lot. I have a series that I post on Saturdays that is my sort of editorial thing and these that keep going viral, which is very cool. If you are a VP of marketing or above, you can join our CMO Huddles starter program, which is free. It's at cmohuddles.com. If you are a marketing leader, we'll upgrade you to a guest pass and you can experience the whole thing. And then, of course, we've got our, podcast, Renegade Marketers Unite, and welcome, where we're, some CMO or something important to CMO is happening every single week. So it would be a nice complement to yours because we tend to focus on leadership issues and bigger issues than and broader issues that CMOs face. So, yeah,
Excellent.
Ping me on LinkedIn if you heard this show. Yeah, let's connect.
Awesome. Well, Drew Neisser, Penguin in Chief of CMO Huddles, thank you so much. It's been great having you today on Print to Pixel. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.